I would like to welcome on stage Miro Straka from Straka Studio, who is by now, I think, a pretty well-established developer from currently from Vienna, maybe Slovakia. From Slovakia, residing also in Vienna, but from Slovakia, who recently successfully published the game Loot River, and he already had several lectures about it, all of them very fascinating, about the process of the development, but this one is, I think, the next step in the development process, because this is a post-mortem, so now we will actually see how it all worked out in the end. Or maybe is working out still, because I think the game is still being updated. So, Miro, thank you very much for coming, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. We are having like technical difficulties. I had speaker notes, but somehow we can't trigger them, so like the presentation will be maybe a little bit messy, but I'm sure you'll be fine. And also, I tend to speak rather fast, and so if you don't understand something or you don't understand something because it's in English, you can anytime just interrupt me and ask for it like in Slovakian or whatever. And yeah, so this is like Loot River. It's a game that I've been working on for quite some time, and it's actually now released. And for those of you that don't know it, here's a trailer. And yeah, we're gonna talk about this trailer later, so watch it and pay attention maybe. Okay, so this was the Loot River, and so we're gonna look at, you know, what it did wrong, what it did possibly well, and I'm gonna talk about like stuff that I can talk because it's not under NDA, and some stuff I obviously can't talk about. But yeah, so first a bit about me. I've been doing games for some time now, and before Loot River, I released like 2 small games that are like mobile linear puzzlers. They are called Euclidean Lands, which is the cubicle one, and Euclidean Skies, which is the other one. And I've essentially done them all by myself. So yeah, and they were rather simple, right? There are no animations in it. It's a linear progression. It's a puzzle game, and it's turn-based. And so jumping from there into like procedurally generated roguelike with like animations and lots of content was quite a jump. And you know, also it was first time working actually with a team for me. Yeah, so Loot River started as sort of an exploration of mechanics. Like, if you take a look at my previous games, they all revolve around transformations of the world rather than transformations or like rather than playing normally with your player character. It's more about the changes that the player does to the world and how he can transform the world to the advantage. And they revolved around rotations. And I knew I wanted to do something similar, but I wanted to do something simpler, so I wanted to do something with translations, right? With just the movement. So obviously, like, sliding puzzle mechanics come into play here. And soon after release of Euclidean Skies, I started like with this one over here, and I thought like I'm gonna make like 4 months tops, like simple puzzler, release on iOS, and make some small money, but whatever. I made like I started working with Rene, he's animator, he was also animator on Loot River. And we started like, just putting it all together. But after about 20 levels, it somehow became boring, and I knew that it's not gonna be very successful. Like, it was just very simple, boring game, and I thought like, okay, we gotta like spice it up. We gotta think of something new. So we started moving around, and like, what I was doing was essentially doing something that I was very comfortable with. That means like 3D and puzzlers and linear and mobile and like nice shaders and like everything like that. And we started making like, it's essentially the same game with a different skin, where the gimmick was that also the environment around you transformed. And again, we made like about 10, 20 levels before we found out that it's boring even for us to test and to play and to develop. So we tried to move further, and we, again, what we did was like essentially reskin the same game. But this time we thought like, okay, we're gonna pull a little narrative, and it's gonna be stealth game about you working in an office and trying to avoid managers in there or whatever, like daily meetings. And back then was BoJack Horseman very popular, so we did it all like with like you know, like these sort of humanoid animal characters, and it was like, this one was really developed. We had like 30 levels, different animations, different shit inside, but essentially we again came to the same conclusion that it's fucking boring, and like there's not much in play there, right? And it was all just skinning and skinning and skinning the same shit over. And then we thought, okay, let's do one more. And we really tried this time to make it a bit more interesting. And you can see it's sort of like, it's merged between all of these. And on top of that is like sort of Inception style puzzle where you zoom out different layers, and what was before your world suddenly becomes only a block in the puzzle, right? And this one we really like pushed and made like really tight and nice and made a demo. And I actually pitched it for Apple Arcade, and that was the worst pitch I ever did. It was really a disaster. I couldn't connect into their system or something, and no one could understand me because I needed to call them on the phone. And yeah, needless to say, it didn't work out with Apple Arcade. And at this point, it was like 9 months in a game that I wanted to make a quick cash grab of 4 months or something. And I was like, you know, it's not working out. It cost us like already some money, and maybe it's time to just know when it's over. And we just stopped, and I went to work for like random companies doing seashell renders or some shit. And but the idea still kept coming back to me, and I kept thinking about like why it was wrong, like why it wasn't working out, like why it wasn't interesting. And I thought that the problem might be that I'm doing only the things that I know how to do, like 3D puzzlers and like mobile and things that I am comfortable with doing. So I thought like there is something in that mechanic, but I gotta change it up. And I just made like this random prototype with like ugly 2D art, and like it was controlled by 2 controllers, and it was a co-op game. It was like I completely stopped thinking about any sort of business model or experience that we had, and just made this. And my friend Yogi then invited me to like pitch it for, it's called Subotron. It's in Vienna, where they like this sort of like a game dev initiative where they sometimes invite like publishers and whatever, and you can present the game. So I thought that maybe, okay, this is something, but like obviously it looked ugly, and I needed to like polish the presentation a bit. And that's how we came into having Loot River. Like this is what it was like. It was like, yeah, some sort of 2D art. It was not pixel art. Obviously the character is from the Office game or something. And it was a co-op game back then. And we went there and we pitched it to, I think there was someone from Superhot, and there was someone from Handy Games and 11-bit Studios or whatever. And all of the feedback there was like, it's a cool idea and it's fun to play, but because it's a co-op game, we don't know if it's fun to play because it's fun to play with friends and because the friends are fun, or because it's actually a fun game. And I don't know how it's now, but back then, publishers were not really interested in funding co-op games. Like all of them were saying basically like, if you can figure out how to make this single player, like reach out to us, we might be interested. And so yeah, so Loot River went back on track, and I started figuring out how it can be single player, and this is what I came up with. Yeah, right. So you can see that this was actually much closer to the end product that actually came up to be. And this was the point where I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. It's kind of fun, possibly, although like lots of stuff in that video were not actual gameplay. There was just like mock-up stuff or like After Effects stuff, you know, like inventory, whatever. And I knew like it's now time to start approaching someone and get some money. Yeah, so like obviously there was the FPU, Slovak Arts Council, but I think that came actually later after I signed with Superhot. And so my strategy on approaching like publishers and funds was following. Like obviously you need to prepare your pitch, and that pitch needs to be like perfect, like really tight and really good, and you really have to spend time on it because it's like the first impression that's like the most important, but we're gonna get there later. But essentially what I did was like I searched for publishers that I'm like really interested in, like, you know, like Superhot or Devolver, or like that was my like top tier publishers, you know, like those that I really wanted to land. Then I searched for publishers that if I couldn't land those, maybe I could work with, you know, some like mid publishers, you know, I'm not gonna name, not to offend anyone, but like, you know, like publishers that I could imagine working with, but they were not my top choice. And then there was the rest of the publishers that I knew I'm not interested in working with under any conditions, but they were still not completely shitty, and I used those as testing pool, right? So what does it mean is, I prepared a pitch, I embedded the pitch into a website, and back then, obviously, Loot River was not announced, so Loot River website had 0 traffic, right? So there was no one there, and I made it like, so lootriver.com/publisher1 or publisher2. So I saw the links and I knew the links. And you can also embed Google Analytics, but actually it's like easier if you have no traffic to just track it manually via the logs in the website. And so what I did was like, each publisher had their own URL that I sent to them. And I immediately knew if they saw it and if I need to follow up with an email or no, how long it took them to respond, how many members of their team are actually looking at the presentation, like what's the interest there, are they opening it often, like how long it took to get back to me. And these are all the things that you can later use in negotiations because it's information that you can somehow judge their interest. But what was here important was that I was only sending it back then to the publishers I'm not interested in, and I would only progress to the second step if more than, and this is something that you have to guess for yourself, I said like more than 75% were actually interested. That means if I sent like 5 pitches, I wanted to have at least 4 positive answers before I moved to the next stage, because then I knew that what I have is good. And if it wasn't good, if all of them were like, no, we are not interested, then I know that something is either wrong with my game or my presentation or my pitch or something like that, and I would need to polish it up. And if it was not good enough, then I would simply repeat it with another batch of publishers, because there's like shit ton of random publishers that you can reach out to, and you can just use them as testing ground before moving further. So after I had like this pitch really nailed down, and like not nailed down in my opinion, but nailed down in a positive response from the publishers, I would move to the second stage, which were those publishers that I really wanted. And again, I would just collect as much data as I could, and I would send, and I would see like whether someone opened it, whether the person I reached out through Twitter opened it, or I need to go through like proper channels, and if they like shared it with the team or whatever. And you also see like what's the time between like opening it and responding to your email, and like all of these. And you essentially track these to know how interested the parties are. And I'm not, like I try to tell myself that it's useful, it's maybe not useful, maybe you're not into it, and you don't want to do it, but like the first step was definitely useful. And then after this was like concluded, obviously not concluded in negotiations, but concluded in tracking. That means after that I can pollute my URLs with whatever publishers, because these are essentially just like, okay, we did all of these, and as a backup plan at the same time doing the other things. So like what you want to get out of this is not like the interest of your dream publisher, but also of other publishers, just so you have contracts that you can compare, right? Just so you have offers that you're able to compare in terms of how much money you're getting, like what's the split, and what are the different conditions, if you're keeping IPs or not. Because it's, in my opinion, very important not to have just a single option and just think like, okay, this is what we're getting, and like we're just gonna take it. But to have also some sort of negotiation leverage and some sort of recent knowledge of how it's in the business. And Yeah, so this was actually part of my pitch deck. And this was not a pitch deck I sent to the publishers. This was later pitches for platforms, right? Pitching for platforms is even more important there because you have a shit ton of publishers, but you don't have shit ton of platforms, right? You have like, what, 3 major platforms or something? You know, you have like Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation. And so you really want to nail down this presentation, like in terms of content, in terms of what's there, but also in terms of like, really tight graphic design, like everything needs to fit together, just so it's very easy, convenient, and very appealing for them to browse through the presentation. It's not enough to be just like, this is my game and it's awesome or whatever, but also the look and feel of the presentation really makes it for you. And again, like, I like to use Google Slides because it's, you know, you just share a link or whatever, and you can embed GIFs actually inside, which is very good. So like GIFs can be up to 20 megabytes, so rather large GIFs, but it plays like no problem. And you can really play with this, like make perfect loops, make it like really nice. And the other thing that you can do is, again, you can take the Google presentation, embed it into your website and share the URL to your website, so you again have all the tracked information of how the platforms are actually or are not interested, whether they saw it, maybe you're just cold emailing someone and you need to see if they actually opened the pitch and refused it, or if they never opened it and you need to email someone else. And yeah, this is another slide from that presentation. Like you see that, like we really spent time on it because it's really important. It's their first contact with your product and you really want to convince them that you can do it and that it's gonna be good. So like, you know, this is like JPEG and then like GIF is on top of it and it's like, actually, I think I fixed it frame by frame just so it's like perfectly looping and everything, like really spending time on what normal people would think it's bullshit. But it is really important because they are getting that kind of amount of pitches that you're just gonna be like, one of million or something, and you really need to stand down and you really need to, yeah. So then we actually agreed with Xbox to go together, and this is again like, they can offer you various things and they can help you in various ways. And for example, for us, it was getting into Showcase, right? So if I just made a press release and released the game, it would never gather enough interest as if I'm included in some sort of showcase, because that kind of gives you validation, right? Like from user perspective, if Xbox or if Switch is presenting you themselves, that means that the game has to be sort of good. And people tend to watch these showcases and news people tend to write about these showcases. And for us, it really worked out very well. Like, I set up a new YouTube account, and this was like 500,000 after a month or something. We were definitely one of the most watched videos from that showcase. And we're gonna look at why, like what worked out and what didn't. But what's also very important there is that you don't announce the game before. Like, this is something that that's yours and that's like has insane value, that you didn't make a small announcement before, but you leave it to your partner, to the publisher, or to Showcase, or to platform to announce it, because announcing something new and something exciting is always cooler than just showing an existing trailer of an already announced game. You know, so my advice on this was mostly to not announce game before you are ready, or not announce game before you can reasonably participate in some sort of showcase, or before you landed everything down. Because essentially, if you just announce it, you're just like handing out shit for free that like you could have used otherwise. And obviously, the structure of the trailer, of the announcement trailer, is again as important as the pitch deck, because it's the first contact of users with your game, and you need to think about how you're doing it, right? So it's a very different thing if you're showcasing game in a showcase, where you know people are gonna sit through 1.5 minutes of your trailer because they are watching the showcase, not your game. And it's very different if you just cold announcing your game for whatever sites, where people can just turn off YouTube or something, you know? Like it's completely different scenario. Like here, in this case, you have more time to build up stuff and to do stuff that you want to do. And in the other one, you have maybe 3 seconds to really catch the attention and really sell the game. So like, we went for like the slower build-up, and I think it immensely pay off, like looking at the numbers. But like essentially at the start, we just showed that it's pixel game because lots of people have a aversion for pixel games. So we like set the expectations low, like, oh, it's another pixel art side scroller or something. But then we'll kind of like build it up, like top down is a little bit rarer with like super fluid animations and like violence and blood and whatever. So maybe people are like a little bit like, oh, okay, maybe that's not so bad, you know? And then we kept rising the expectations from there, right? Then we showed movement. And the movement, actually, you can't really, I think, see it here, but the game has like real-time global illuminations on pixel art and real-time shadows. And that's something that wasn't really there at that point. So people are like, okay, this is not only pixel art, but this is like actually cool looking. And then like there came the thing that normally you would show as the first to catch their attention, but this came maybe 20 seconds in where you like pulled out the platform. And people are like a little bit confused, like what happened? Like there was a lots of stuff that happened. And after that, we showed the logos. So there's like, you know, a couple of seconds of break for people to like comprehend what happened. And then we explained it with like a funny way of sorts, like, you know, like you sort of dodging these platforms and they are chasing you. And that's when it clicked for people that what is happening in the game. And they're like, ah, clever. And like, then on top of that, they see the amazing water simulation. And at that point, lots of people are already very excited about the game, right? So like, at that point, you sold it. And then came this moment, which is my favorite moment from the trailer. And like, so if you look at it, it's sort of like you know, like this platform is coming into the other platform, and it repeats 3 times, and then there's an explosion, and it's obvious sexual innuendo. And like people were asking me like was this intentional? Like, yeah, obviously it was intentional because it's like it's kind of, you know, like stupid and disgusting. But when you looked at the trailer on YouTube, like the first comments were like, oh, what you doing, step platform and whatever. Like, but like. This is a good engagement because any sort of engagement is good. And like I gave them something that if they didn't watch trailer for anything else, they would send it to friends like, look at how stupid crazy this game is and like what they put in the trailer or something. And it's, you really want people to talk about whatever in your game, you don't care. And yeah, so, you know, after this, there was like a break of some sort of like showing some sort of stuff. Then again, you know, something funny, like how it's disgusting, how the blood goes, and then sort of build up to like the end of the trailer. So this was like perceived end of the trailer originally, where it builds up to the action and you die. But then actually, no, wait, there's more. And then it builds up again, and there's even something more disgusting or something more shocking, or like, you know, just like always building up for more. And then it ends, and you think it ended, but it actually didn't. And there was like funny scene at the moment, at the end, where like this platform goes up and down. And this was again like the other most commented thing in the trailer. And like YouTube now shows you these graphs of most click moments in the videos. And when you look at it, it's just here. Like, you know, like there's obviously some sort of like mountain range or whatever, but the spike is here. And this was like really, I think, a key moment for like social media or sorts of like talking about the game. Yeah, so as I said, like we can't really look at some sort of numbers, but we definitely can look at Steam wishlists, right? So there are like 4 visible spikes. And like obviously A is the launch, and like it was, I don't know, like 3,000 wishlists per day or something, which I thought was pretty good. Like our modest goal was like 15,000 wishlists at launch, and like most ideal goal was 40 to 50,000. And yeah, so like A was this trailer that you saw that we spent like 2 months on, like really pimping it out and whatever. But B was basically Day of the Dead and Guerrilla, what is it? Guerrilla Collective, where we shown a video which was prepared in 1 day, which was essentially just a gameplay prep. Like there was really low effort stuff because we just didn't have time for these showcases, because they also told us very late that we are in. Yeah, strangely enough, it seems like it's much more important to show gameplay than to show the trailer. But I also think that if we did it the other way around, we would have much less wishlists, because here we sort of got the notoriety and like with the cool trailer and with the cool stuff, and people knew already about the game. And so from there, we build up to this moment. But if we did it the other way around, it would not work because the gameplay videos were really not as tight as the trailer was. Like, you know, like it wouldn't build up to this sort of amount. And then obviously like D is obviously like the launch week, and C is actually the demo during the Game Awards, which where the downfall started. Yeah, so this was like, in the C moment, we spent like a lot of time on the trailer, which was like pixel art, animated, cool like stuff. Like there was like lots of these scenes, and it cost us a lot to produce, and it wasn't really worth it. Like I wouldn't do it again. Like we were again in some sort of ID showcase, which was great, but it was like the demos for the games were supposed to be part of the Game Awards, but they really somehow weren't. I don't know, it was like this whole weird situation about it. But anyways, like we got the demo out and whatever. And then what happened is that despite not having any sort of real marketing for the demo or something, some people picked it up, like Iron Pineapple, he's like pretty good YouTuber that has like 2 million views on the video the next month or something. And he's usually very critical about the games that he plays, but he was like very enthusiastic about Loot River, and he was like, oh, this is super cool and whatever. And we also had like, it was on Xbox, so on Xbox we had like really good reviews, and on Steam and really good feedback. And I thought like, okay, like this is all good, you know, like the game is playable and people like it, so we're possibly safe, right? But this was, yeah, this was not so smart to think, because people who actually were playing the demo were people that were already enthusiastic about the game, and people that really like roguelikes and that like Dark Souls and these sort of games, but they were not your general consumer. So like the feedback that we were getting there was rather skewed, you know, and obviously I guess like you have lower expectations of demo maybe than of the full product and like all sorts of things. But essentially like the point was that we felt really good about the game, that it's like, you know, release worthy state, right? And we started working towards release. And obviously like, yeah, we got into the popular upcoming on Steam, which is huge, which was like this huge spike at the end that was like 35,000 wishlists per day or something. And it's really good, and this is something that you, for your Steam game, should take care of, that A, you have really tight icon, but B, the 4 images are the first 4 screenshots that you have on your Steam page. And this is something that user sees when he just hovers over that. So the first 4 ones should ideally tell some sort of story or tell what you are doing in the game, and should be like the most important. So like, you know, like you glance a look at this and you immediately see like, oh, like, you know, like something happened, like, so you're probably moving the platforms, and then there's like this flashy blob and you're like, oh, maybe there's something interesting. And the point of these 4 screenshots is just to get the user to click on the game. And yeah, and so we got into the D phase where we thought we were launching. And this was actually like, also personally, it was very, very tough period for me, and yeah, and the game was just, it was really stressful releasing on consoles. It was first time for me and for us releasing on consoles and everything, and yeah, wait, I don't know what's the next slide. Oh yeah, so then we released, and if you're following the game or if you're aware of the game, it wasn't really good. Right? So what happened is like, we released the game and we released it at like 6 p.m. or something after a lot of struggle. And it got 8.5 from Game Informer, and like it got into global top sellers and like the positive reviews on Steam and everything. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really good. It's like, I didn't expect it, because at that point I was really like out of my mind and I hated it. And I went to sleep kind of happy. And then I woke up in the morning and just suddenly there was like lots of negativity and lots of negative reviews and lots of like users who played it for 20, 30 minutes, left a negative review and left. And obviously like there were bugs in the game. I mean, there are always bugs in the game, and there were bad design choices and everything like that. But it was also like, I think I overshot with the marketing. Like we just had too broad a reach. Like, as I said, the people who are into roguelikes and everything, they liked the game and they played like tens of hours in the game and they were happy. But then there were people who just maybe saw the trailer and thought it's a cool game and thought it's something different than what it is. And they just like installed it and played it and found out it's not their thing at all. And it just started like snowballing from there. because when you get into mixed or negative reviews on Steam, they stop with the feature, right? So you are out of global top sellers, you're out of any features, you're just sort of dead. And yeah, I was really, really down at that point, and I was like, okay, can we take this thing off the internet, please, and can we just stop? But like Superhot stepped in, and Alistair Hepson, he's like really cool, and he was like, okay, Miro, like we can turn this around if you want. You know, like obviously they were like, it's up to you, but if you want, we can try. And they were essentially handling the messaging around the game, and I was handling the patches. And yeah, so we really like started to work on turning around the prospects of the game. And so like with the day 3 patch, it already like the positive reviews already started climbing a lot. And like the new, like obviously like the old ones were just there, you can't help that. And yeah, essentially like, you know, like this was 3 days after launch, so it's not like so many like big changes to the games. It was really small fixes and small things that I very much regret were not done at the release, but like we just didn't know, you know, like there were lots of questionable content in the game. For example, there are 6 main zones where you fight, but actually 3 of them are sort of like secret, like you need to spend some time in the game to discover that they even exist and to get there. And like the Escapist magazine, they just said like, oh, the game has only 3 zones because, like, you know, because they were so hidden and so convoluted. Like, I'm a big Souls player, and I thought that other people also enjoy this, but they possibly do enjoy it, but in the Dark Souls and not in Loot River. So in here, I should have been much more clearer with what's the objectives and what you're doing and how you're gonna get there, and just better communication, and also like questionable design choices like, to get more healing potions, you need to first invest the healing potions that you have, so you don't actually have them, and then only at the end of the run you're gonna get more, and like different things that I thought are interesting, but maybe I should have just kept the interesting main mechanic and then just made a normal game. But yeah, so we started turning it around actually, and it got to the point where the Steam reviews started being like the recent reviews, very positive, and like obviously there's a lot of negative reviews. You can't really do much about it. But what you can do, and what Ellie did, was like, after we fixed some things that people were asking for in the reviews, he went and he manually replied to the people in there of like, hey dude, like we saw your feedback and we fixed it, and maybe you should give it another try or whatever. And it's questionable how much this actually had value in terms of time he spent on it and in terms of what he did, but he actually converted a couple of people from negative review to positive review, so that's also something you can do. And wait, I don't know. What's next? Oh yeah. Yeah, essentially we just kept pushing, and we kept adding content, and we kept adding enemies, and we did like daily runs and whatnot. And the thing is that when you have 200,000 wishlists, those wishlists don't disappear even if your game falls out of featuring. Those wishlists stay. And what happens now is whenever the game goes on sale, people who wishlisted the game receive an email about the sale. So obviously it's not as good as if it was perfect launch, but there's a thick tail on the game because all of these people still have it wishlisted, and they periodically produce it, and we sort of want to reach into that pool with like more content and more stuff to convince those potential customers into customers of the discounted game. And I guess it's sort of working, and yeah. And yeah, so what are we working on now is like actually a level editor, so each user can like, you know, like design their own levels and actually share it online amongst themselves. And yeah, this is what we focus on, and somehow we're just slowly chipping away. And I think that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miro. If you have any questions, we should have a link or a code to our Slido channel on the screen pretty soon. So please use that to ask questions. And meanwhile, I think we have some questions, but these are from the previous lecture, so we'll have to wait a little bit for the new ones. Meanwhile, like the first question, Miro, that comes to my mind is regarding testing and playtesting before the launch. If maybe this was done how, or maybe it wasn't, I don't know. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
So we actually tested a lot, but this was again the same sort of issue that was in the demo. Like we didn't test with paid people, so we didn't hire any agency to provide like unbiased people for testing. But what we did, we had like rather good Discord with like, I don't know, 600 people in, and essentially we released overall, I think, 100 to 200 codes to these people during the development to, you know, get their feedback. But what was the problem there was like the people that are already on a Discord for a game that's about to be released are the people that are really, really, really into that game or really, really, really into that genre. So like the people that we were testing on were generally happy with the game, and that they are the people that play the game a lot, and they are the people for whom the game is really good. And so like the feedback was rather skewed there because the pool of our testers were simply very similar, like compared to the broad marketing and the broad outreach that the game had. We were very focused on just like this single group, and yeah, it wasn't great.
Also, if you don't want to use Slido, you can just raise your hand. If we'll see you, hopefully, we will call you out and you can ask. Yeah.
Hi, first of all, thank you for the presentation. My question is quite simple. How big was the team that worked on this?
This actually varies a lot. Like, so like everyone is essentially remote, and people were coming in and out as essentially freelancers, because as we're a Slovakian company, no one really wants to be employed in Slovakia except for Slovakians, but then you're quite limited to the pool of people that you can hire. So yeah, it varied. Like, you know, like there were generally between 5 on normal time to 10 on peak times, right? But it greatly varies because also like Superhot is pulling a lot of weight, and I can't count them as people working on the game because they are something else, right? And yeah, but essentially it's like, you know, like me, then there was Brian doing like lots of level editor design, Julia helping with some coding now and then, and Emmett doing coding, then Alex did the water, and then Francesco and Alicia did like pixel art. But these are all the tasks that you don't really, and these are all especially people who don't really want to work just for one person, or sort of, you know, like they are interested in more than just your game, so you sort of have to work with what they have. And then there were Wobbler Sound doing like the sound and music. They were fantastic, and yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, but it fluctuates a lot.
So thank you, Miro, for coming and all the useful tips. So for two quick ones. How did it all work? Like the business-wise, of course, you will not mention the specific numbers, but I mean, like, have you covered all the like costs and related to the question, the previous one, about the team? So if you can spend one sentence on that. And the second one, what about the future projects, your future endeavors? Is already something forming in your mind or not?
So thank you. So first of all, like obviously, due to the fact that we are on Game Pass, I can't really comment on these sort of things. But it was really, really, really good for us. And I don't know, are you Slovakian or no? So I think I'm gonna just say it in Slovakian. Ty si môžeš ďalší rok pozrieť na Finstate, ako sa firmám darí, koľko majú zisk, koľko zarobili, a z toho to vieš odhadnúť všetko. So I can't really talk about it, but yeah.
Secret Slovak information
was well, I'm really like, you know, like whenever I finished the project before, I immediately had like this, like I'm gonna do something or whatever, like prototype or whatever, and I just sort of lost it. And like obviously we're doing stuff on the Loot River side, but I don't really feel like doing anything at the moment. I'm just sort of like, it was really, really, really exhausting at the end. Like, you know, like also my wife is a doctor and she worked in the COVID department, so there was like 60 to 70 hours per week during the release time, and we have 2 small kids, and it was just like, it was a shit ton, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that at the moment.
All right. We have some questions on Slido. First one, 2.5 million views on YouTube. Did that convert into many new wish lists?
This is kind of hard to say. Like you can track some sort of like you can track direct connection between YouTube and Steam, and you can see where the users are coming from, and you can sort of guess the wishlist conversion rate. But this is really not. This is really not something that you can somehow guess or somehow estimate from data, because for lots of people, they are watching on their phone and then they see the game and it leaves an impression in them. It's like sort of like they know and are aware of the game, and maybe they wishlist the game because of the trailer, but from another source. So you can't really say, but like obviously, the more views you have, the better for you, I guess.
Another question, why did you decide to use the right stick to control the character instead of the left stick like it usually is in most games?
We actually initially had it like flipped, but there was an issue that you're using for lots of player actions. You're using like the small buttons like the X, O, triangle, whatever, and then like when you're using the stick, you can't really press those like you know. Wait, so which one did he say?
Right stick to control the character.
Yeah, so now you're controlling, like with the right stick, you're just controlling the character, and you have like your other thumb free to press the actions that you want, because oftentimes you want to do an action while you're moving the character. So it was sort of natural choice, but I think you can actually remap that, but yeah.
Okay. Another question, how many iterations did it take with test publishers to achieve at least 75% success rate?
It was really simple for me. It was just one, but it's also like I have fetish for like this, for like tight presentations and for like really doing like lots of good content in a short thing. And it was also not my first pitch, and yeah, but since you're using sort of like low interest publishers, there's a lot of them, so you can take, I think, as many as you like. I think it's just important not to step into the more important phase before you are ready. Also, I didn't really mention the Slovak Arts Council, so I also want to thank them for like the support that they did, and I hope it's sort of like they're sort of at least a little bit happy with that. Yeah?
Did you prepare like specifically for the Slovak Arts Council's application, or how was the process there when you compare it to pitching to publishers?
It was actually more stressful for me, because like Slovak Arts Council is the reason that I actually returned to Slovakia from Austria, because I found out about it, that they are supporting the games, and it's really hard to get a support in Austria for these sorts of games, like for like violent games that are actually games and not a social commentary or something similar. And in here it was kind of open, and you know, like back then the Smer government ended, and like I found out about Arts Council, so I felt like, okay, it's a good time to return to Slovakia. And like I really stressed out about that application, because they wanted like PDFs. That was something that I was not really accommodated with. The game was in like not really as polished stage as I would like to be. I also did like sort of public funding for the first time, so I didn't know how many. Like, you know, like I knew publishers already and I knew people in the business, but I never really worked with like government sort of thing, and I didn't really know what to expect. So I actually spent a lot of time on there, and I almost missed the deadline, and it was just off, yeah.
All right. Another question from Slido is, did you have offers from high-ranking publishers like Devolver, etc.? And if so, why did you refuse them?
Yeah, this was in my notes that I didn't see to tell you. Like, yeah, I did, and I decided to go with Superhot for two reasons. One is that their offer was like really good, and they were really nice people. And the other thing was that they are not a publisher; they are a fund. And back then, when I was doing it like 3 years ago, I thought like, oh, I'm gonna build a brand, and oh, I'm gonna be a publisher, and I'm gonna like, you know, like, because when you publish with Devolver, it's a Devolver game, it's not your game. It's like, no, you can't really name 5 people that develop for Devolver. You can't. And I just had this sort of ego, and I thought like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and it's fine, and you know, perfect. And yeah, I probably would not do that again. But yeah.
All right. Maybe last question from me. So in a way, and I'm very oversimplifying things quite a lot, the Superhot guys had a very similar story in the beginning, let's say, when it comes to their success and the success of their games. So this is like a thought thing, maybe just about to think about. Have you been considering doing something like they do with their support for indie games? Yeah, because like you mentioned, their model is very similar, and now you're maybe in a position where you can maybe also support some indie developers. You don't want to make games anymore, so
I'm not sure I'm like really qualified. I think I'm barely qualified to be talking to other people, considering how it all worked out. So I'm really not sure. And obviously, like if it's something like like questions or you want to see the pitch deck for consoles or whatever, you can easily find my email online. You can just shoot me email. It's no problem at all. But whether or not I want to be as involved as fund or publisher, that's a whole another story that I'm not ready to explore.
all right. So maybe just something to think about in the future. Thank you, Miro, very much.
Thank you.
Miro will be here with us, I think, till tomorrow. So don't hesitate to talk to him. He has a lot of interesting information that wasn't mentioned over here too, and a lot of great advice. So definitely get in touch with him. And Miro, thank you very much.
Thank you.